you feel the way I do, let's get started right away. And I've been holding out for the likes of you, and I've been waiting for this day.
This is Pamela Kuhn, and the curtain is up on Center Stage, the show about the arts and the artists behind their work. What's in a name? Well, let's try one. Alan Walker. Let's see, there's Alan Walker, musician. And if I Google that, what I find is Alan Walker, the Norwegian DJ and music producer who has risen to some considerable fame in his career. But there is more than one Alan Walker. And I have the man of the hour in front of me right now on Zoom. And this is Alan Walker from Connecticut, the musician from Connecticut. And as far as I know, he is not a DJ, but rather a man who leads a double life. No, not as a double agent, as a spy, and then as a normal man on the street, but rather a musician who has spent a lifetime with melodies running through his head and his heart. And on June 28th, he is thrilled to release his sophomore solo album entitled A Little Too Late on Aunt Mimi's record label. Back to Center Stage. It has been a while, Alan.
It has indeed. It seems like just yesterday, but a lot has happened, I think. But
Oh my
it is
gosh.
so great to be back. It was so much fun the first time we did this, and I'm sure it will be equally fun this time around.
I think so. So 5 years ago, you and I spoke on WGCH radio. We talked about your double life. We talked about your work in your first band, your first New York City band. I mean, you came to some really level, of expertise with that band, didn't you?
Yeah, prominence was the goal. I'm not sure we achieved that, but we certainly had some recognition and played quite a bit in those years, and not only in the New York area and all around the Northeast and other places around the country. We were always an unsigned act and doing things our own way and enjoying it, and yeah, those were great years. It certainly, as fun as it was, it sort of took its toll. I think we reached a point where it was just hard to balance, work life, home life, and being a band on the road. I used to say that because I have a day job at a publishing company, just to correct because there are people who are called publishers at where I work.
Mhm.
And they're the ones who like run imprints. I'm not a publisher, but I'm a publishing person.
Okay.
So
You
I don't I
publish.
don't I don't want to like trick anybody, and who knows who's listening who might object. But yeah, I certainly work with publishers though, and I work at Penguin Books, Penguin Random House, which is the biggest trade publishing company in the world, really, and a great place to work. And but where was I? Oh yes, so the band, the Brilliant Mistakes, and
The
and
Brilliant Mistakes.
yeah, and
First of
there was
all, your
oh.
names for everything. From the name of your first band, The Brilliant Mistakes, which I think has a correlation to Elvis Costello. Am I
It
right?
does. It does. And there's actually the Brilliant Mistakes was actually well, I was in bands in high school and in college, and my first real band was a New York band called Club Iguana. I always say the unfortunately named band Club Iguana. We went through a number of names that in retrospect could have been cooler, but we settled on Club Iguana. Our drummer, who is still one of my dearest friends, he was a Texan, and he came from Austin, Texas, and there was a roving party called Club Iguana, and we named the band after that for who knows what reason. It's a very 80s name, just the idea of being a club. The second band, though, the Brilliant Mistakes, which this friend of mine, Mickey, the drummer, was in for many years, at least through our first record, was indeed named after an Elvis Costello song called "The Brilliant Mistake," but it was also sort of a reference to this idea that especially is true, I think, in pop music, that you're sort of um, you're an amalgam of all these influences that you've absorbed throughout your life. I mean, those of us who play music and write music and play pop music or rock music, whatever you want to call it. Um, we sort of the food reference, you are what you eat, you are what you listen to, and it sort of comes out in its own mysterious way, and in a way, and that's where this idea brilliant mistake comes from for us. The name of the song, not name of the band, not the Costello song, but it's this idea that what you make is sort of accidental, but it's also because of all the stuff that came before,
I
so
love
that's
that. It
yeah.
gets back to art being a paradox all the time. I constantly talk about this on my show. There are so many elements that come together for us as artists. And it's interesting to me, you're speaking about music right now, but in your work at Penguin, and I believe you're really associated with the educational aspect of that and the
Right.
department.
Yeah.
You're pulling together, we can say the same thing. You're pulling together all the elements of we are what we read, so to speak.
Very
And
much.
the more we read and the more we put into our kind of melting pot, the better writers we become. And this must have affected your music making along the way.
Yeah, I mean, I've been fortunate enough in my professional career to have worked with many authors and known many authors, and I'll say this. I mean, it's true for musicians as well. You can't be a writer unless you're a reader. So I think, being a listener is inherent in being a musician. You can't you don't just be you become a musician through by starting out as a listener. Maybe Mozart started playing when he was 3 before he heard anything. Who knows? I mean, maybe there are the genius exceptions. So
I think
but
so. I
people
think
who come
so.
out basically people who come out playing. Billy Preston was one of those. I don't know if you've ever seen. There's a great video on YouTube of Billy Preston, the great keyboard player and soul
Oh,
singer.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
He who I saw once and was one of the greatest things I ever saw. And there's a great video of him with Nat King Cole when Billy Preston was a child, and they're playing a duet. And Nat King Cole is at the top of the piano, gets off the seat and walks around to the bottom part of the piano. And Billy Preston, while the song's going on, just keeps playing. He must be about 8 or something. And they just keep doing this, circling the piano stool and getting off and going back around to the and that's how good he was. That's how good they
Wow.
both were. But he was a kid. Billy Preston was a child when he was doing that. So
And
anyway,
a genius, and a genius.
yeah,
And Billy
absolutely,
Preston filtered into the lives of many. And one band that I know has had a huge influence on your life, and that is the Beatles.
absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And yeah, the Beatles. I grew up listening to the Beatles. I had older brothers. I think the first record I ever own was Revolver, which was a Christmas gift probably when I was 6 or 7, because my brothers had Beatles albums, so I had to like the only thing I wanted for Christmas was a Beatles album. And then the first album I ever bought myself with my own money was a 25-cent used copy of Beatles 65 in Northampton, Mass. This great little record store there, which we went to, myself and my brothers would go all the time. And yeah, the Beatles were everything. And it's funny, like the segue into the Beatles from Billy Preston is interesting because Billy Preston, one of my favorite albums as a kid, maybe around 13 years old, was the Concert of Bangladesh, this live concert that George
Mhm.
Harrison put on in New York. And there were all these people there who played in that concert. Well, Clapton, of course, and Leon Russell, Billy Preston, and Bob Dylan, and I loved that record. And in a way, that record, all those artists I came to love later in life, but most of my childhood, I just knew them for that one record, and
Wow.
the Billy Preston just for that's the way God planned it, that version. And it's funny to look back on that, to think I like came to all those musicians through that record, and then later, you know, dove into all their, back catalogs and all their music. And Billy Preston, I even got to see him live. So it is kind of funny, it's that spider web of music that just, you know, that you follow everywhere.
That serendipity through 6 degrees of separation, always
Exactly.
in the music world, Alan Walker.
Exactly.
So I want to talk to you about what happened in COVID. I mean, you and I met 5 years ago. We never thought something like this was going to take place. And for some, I'm one of those people. I mean, magic happened during COVID in what I developed in my own home and
Mhm.
within the sanctity of my own home, the kind of chaos of, dashing into New York and off to concerts, it all stopped. And we were all able to come down and become quite centered in who we really are. Did you have that similar experience? And how did you use your time in COVID for your music making?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. It's sort of, I mean, I think everybody was affected in their own ways. Um, so if you can, so last time you and I talked, I was, I'm basically a transplanted New Yorker to Connecticut. I grew up in New York City, and also the Berkshires in Western Massachusetts, in both places at the same time. Um, and and when I was living here, when I started my wife and I moved here about 13 years ago. And for up until 2020, March 2020, I think exactly, I commuted into the city about every day, um, 4 or 5 times a week for many years. And that was quite a travel. So a lot of it's been on the train, which was nice reading time. But it was time like you didn't have options, right? You were on a train going in, you're on a train going out. So basically 2.5, 3 hours each way. And then as of March 2020, I started working at home, sitting in the same seat I'm sitting in now, and maybe a slightly less comfortable one. That was one of the post-COVID things. If I'm going to work at home, I better get invest in a more comfortable chair. So and and I'm still working at home. I gave up my office. I'm officially remote. I go in occasionally for work things, but I actually go in more to rehearse with my band than I go into my actual office. So generally I work from home. And that's sort of been life-changing because suddenly you have 3 hours a day that you just got back to do,
Yep.
hang out with my dogs, play tennis and play music in the basement and maybe write a few songs here and there. And yeah, and I think um, so two things happened, and this is my little advertising moment. So I made this record in 2018, Something Up My Sleeve,
Mhm.
and then we never really put a band together and played those songs live out there in clubs and everything. And of course, when COVID happened, there was really no opportunity to do so because and that was the reason. And then I spent a few years after that record came out. This is going to circle back to the Norwegian Alan Walker. When I released that album, Something Up My Sleeve, um, people found me online and streaming because of my name, maybe mistaking me for the more famous 23-year-old. I think he's permanently 23 in my head. Maybe he's a little older
I
now.
think
He'll
so.
always be 23. And he seems like a very nice guy and he's very talented. It's
You
different
should
kind of
reach
music.
out to him, actually. I mean, you may have to give him a lot of thanks, for the referrals. But anyway,
Well, it's a blessing and a curse, but this is just the blessing part. So I found a lot of people found me, and I've gotten few million streams, and that helps me make a little
wow.
income to put back into making another record. So that was part of it, making another record. But I think also like even though so two things happened, like all these people were listening to my music, but I couldn't really see them or talk to them or I think for an artist it's a great feeling when people are listening to music, but if you can't connect with them in a human way, that's also a little bit frustrating
Yeah.
too. So it it made me feel, oh, now that people know are hearing my music, maybe I want to make more and get more music out there. And and I also want to like put a band together again and like go out there, which I have done in the last year. So for the first time, really like almost 10 years without being after like 30, more than 30 years just playing all the time. It's been really interesting going out and doing it again. Um, the um, the funny, just back to the Alan Walker thing, before I forget, the funny thing is I've never reached out to the famous Alan Walker, but there is another Alan Walker who's a folk singer in not sort of I think southwest of London. Does that make sense? And
Hmm.
he's probably sort of my generation, and he came to music sort of later in life, but he's a really good songwriter and folk singer. And so I've been in touch with him because I reached out to him and said, "Do you get lots of streams because of your name, like people mistaking you for this other guy?" And he said, "Yeah, I do." So, and then we sort of started a friendship just over email, talking about music. So I have another Alan Walker friend. So maybe, yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe it is worth reaching out to the Norwegian at some point.
I think so. And for no other reason than just to check if he's still 23. I mean, because you're right about DJs. In my mind, they're all like 18,
Well,
And
he's famous for wearing a face mask. So people don't know what he looks like, except now
that's right.
he has an Instagram page where you can see exactly what he looks like and see what he's doing on vacation. So he's live though he still wears the face mask. But he plays to like 20,000 people at a concert hall with
Please
all
get
of them.
back to me after you make this connection because I love this. Getting back to my intro, what's in a name? I mean, I'm sure we can find an Alan Walker as an opera singer somewhere too. And if we keep searching, I mean, it's
There's
extraordinary.
there's a music historian, actually, not an opera singer, but there is a music
That's
historian
right.
who's written classical books named Alan Walker too.
That's correct. Actually, I forgot about that. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
my gosh, we should have a party. That, you
If
know?
you if you could get us all in one interview, I think that would be pretty amazing. A panel of
I think
Alan Walkers.
I think that would be fantastic. I feel an album coming on actually, Alan. So, well, you never know.
You never
So
know.
COVID was an opportunity for you to have time for your music, and I find it interesting that after you've been commuting into New York City all the time, now you're commuting in to have time with your band. I mean, did you guys meet up on Zoom during the worst of lockdown? Did you find a kind of creative outlet, via the technical side, I guess is what I'm going to ask in this question, without being present with other members?
Yeah, I think it's for one, I'm sort of a, borderline Luddite. So once I figure out how to use technology, I embrace it, but I'm never one to I'm never like the first, I was like the last person to have a flip phone and maybe the last person to have an iPhone, but once I have it, I embrace it. Um, even Zoom, for example. Now, I mean, like, you can't do Zoom or Teams. You can't have a work at home without getting good at all this stuff. Um, I actually, it's a really good question, actually, because there's a few different ways to answer that. First of all, I've never been, I'll start with this. Like, I bought a 4 track when I was about in my 20s, and I sold it 3 months later because I realized when I'm by myself and I'm playing, I don't want to be playing with studio controls. I just want to play. And if I'm either I'm doing one of two things. I'm either going through songs in my and practicing for a show because I don't want to, there's lots of words to remember. So I just want to make sure the words are always, the next line is always going to come after the line I sing, the right line. And then I want to write. So, and the only way to be in the space to write is, I think if you're worrying about, if, I mean, other people are really good at this and in like recording at home and doing demos. I do demos on voice memos on my phone. I don't do any, you know, I don't want to do any controls, any effects. I just want to play. And the only way I can write is if I put myself in the right headspace. And having gear, worrying about gear and
Hmm.
technology isn't going to help me do that.
Right.
It's hard
Okay.
enough as it is. It used to be,
Okay.
and I'm always curious about people in different generations, if this is true for a lot
Yeah.
of people, is that when I was in my 20s, 30s, I could sit down and write a song. It wasn't necessarily a good song, but I could write a song just like that. But now I can't. Now it's a bit more, I wouldn't say a struggle. It's a struggle to get, it's more, the struggle is just getting your head in the right place where things just happen. Because the only way to do that is if everything's clear, like there's nothing in the way. And that's hard. I think that's harder as you get older generally. At least that's the way I
Oh yeah,
experience.
I agree. But it's really distraction we're talking about. And getting back to the
Right.
technical side, that is a big distraction. I know
Yeah.
I'm intimidated by every aspect of that. In worrying about that, I lose that just a hint of the creativity. I mean,
Yeah.
it's an interesting conundrum. I think for people our age, it's also another dynamic because we have not grown up with these things, planted in our hand. You've grown up with a keyboard. You're more of the Billy Preston kind of school, where a song comes to you, go to the piano, you start to play around. I mean, it comes to you.
Yeah. I mean, it either comes to me in my head as a tune, or it comes to me, I'm just playing the piano and I find things that where a melody suddenly happens, and it can, yeah, it can start in different ways. But again, you have to just, all those receptors have to be open to that feeling, or that idea when it happens. And I think just, distractions is the right word. Distractions can be really good things. I mean, distractions can be family and people
Hmm.
you love, and like
Hmm.
like I say, my dogs, and life is a distraction, but life can be really good. It's not a bad thing. My job is a if I'm just talking about writing music, is a distraction, right? It doesn't help me get in the place that I want to be to write songs. But so it's as you get older, there's more and more of that, and it's just harder to get in that mindset, and be able to prioritize that that
Right.
getting in that mindset. So, but I'm still doing it. That's the important thing, is that, like, the other thing is you can't really try, like, you can't force it either. That's the other mystery,
Hmm.
both challenging thing and sort of mysterious thing. It's really hard to just, you can't just say, I'm going to go downstairs at 8 p.m. or whenever and write. It just doesn't work that way. And sometimes I go downstairs for few months and just look at my keyboards and don't want to go near them. And then there are other times where, like, I start having ideas and I can't help but go down. Yeah, it's just like that. It's a pull. So, and
Wow.
that's what you want, that you want to get to that, into that 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 feeling, right?
That
With
was honest. That was really raw and honest because I believe that happens to every creator. Um, it's interesting. I think we run in cycles.
I
My
do too.
mother,
Yeah.
my 92-year-old mother would say, "Well, are your biorhythms up today or not?" I tend to believe that we do. I don't know. We're as musicians, we're kind of like a river, and there is an ebb and a flow, and sometimes there's a dam, and we're in what I'd call the cocoon mold, where we're really gestating, and we have to sit back for a while, and but yet at one point the door will open, and there is your inspiration. You
Yeah, and
know.
I think you're absolutely right. And writing for me, and most of the songwriters that I know, sort of comes in spurts. It's
Yeah.
sort of like the more you are in that mode, the more you do it. And it also kind of works out that way on a practical level, because generally you want to write songs and then
Mhm.
bringing them to other musicians and playing them with other musicians, or going to a studio recording them, is also a creative process, but it's a very different creative process. That is a process where you go, I'm going to play on this, and we're all going to come here, and we're all going to come together and work on these songs. And then that's where magic happens too, but it's a very different kind of magic. And it's equally as exhilarating, I think. When you have a song and it takes on a new shape because of the people that are
Right.
playing on it. And
Right.
that's also my favorite. Those are really the two reasons I do it, because those are the greatest feelings. Like, once you're finished with a recording, that's the hard part, like promoting it and making CD covers and all that stuff, is like, those are good distractions too. They're
That's right.
important, but it's not like the reason you do it, right? So
Exactly.
Do you want to know what I've got on my mind? Sorry I'm so slow, but I've had nothing but bad luck. Doesn't it mean something to you that every time I turn my head and try to walk away, you're standing cocktail bar. You know it's getting late.
Talk to me about the editing process. I mean, how difficult is that for you, or is it a joy? I mean, do all of you come together, after you record? Is this a mutual decision, or do you assign the editing to someone else?
The editing is as in you mean the mixing of the music or the
Yeah, yeah, and sometimes
yeah.
we got to get rid of one take and use another, and
Yeah.
maybe everybody doesn't agree on that.
Well, that's. I mean, I am a lifelong band person who is now a solo artist, and the musicians I'm using are musicians that are basically paying them. They're the guys I'm working with in the band, and the guys who worked the not just guys, the musicians that worked on the record are all like just like another level for me. I mean, they're people I look up to as far as being players and instrumentalists and musicians. And yeah, it's the so I've worked with the same producer for my two solo records, and he was also the same guy who did the last two Brilliant Mistakes records. And I have a really kind of amazing relationship with him in terms of recording. He's a brilliant guy. He's a great string and horn and vocal arranger. Um, and I basically bring him a song. It used to be you'd have a song and then you bring it to the band and you kind of like workshop it and arrange it as you went, as you played it, right? So, but with Lincoln, when you make a record, I give him my little demos, that I do on my phone, and then we talk about like the ideas that he has for the song, and then we kind of like brainstorm it a little bit, but then he kind of comes up with a plan. Like he says this one could use strings, this one could use horns, this one should just be a ballad and
Mm,
just a few drums. He thinks it all through, and then we kind of hash it out. And then he also has ideas on who the right musician is for each song. So that's kind of the way we've made the record.
okay.
um
So
you
he's a
know
keeper, isn't he, Alan? He's a real keeper.
Indeed, yeah, I love working with him. I mean, it's also, sometimes you want to stretch out and maybe work with someone else, or do something else, just to get out of, doing the same thing, having the same. Sometimes processes, as great as they are, and the people you love working with, you just want to step out and do something different as an artist.
Yeah.
But yeah, Lincoln, I've just have this very like this amazing amount of trust in his sort of organic mode of producing and recording. And by organic, it's like I think that word, what it means to me is we don't really know how it's going to turn out, but like his feelings on what musicians to use, for example, is is sort of a gut feeling, but it's also based on what these particular musicians are good at, right?
Right.
So he knows what he thinks a song needs, and then we go after that using the right guy. So
And
so
we are
that
we're talking about, just to be specific here, we're talking about Lincoln Schleifer,
Lincoln Schleifer, who lives in
Lincoln's log cabin in the Bronx.
Lincoln's Log Cabin in the Bronx. It's a basement studio in his home in Woodlawn, and
Love it.
it's like a no frills studio, but the sounds he makes, are I think are as good as any big studio that you might spend tons of money in, just booking. The great thing about Lincoln is it's sort of open ended. We hash out a deal, for what the production is going to cost, and then he sticks to it, and usually winds up working a lot more hours than he's actually getting paid for. But it's been, that's not the reason I work with him. It's just his sense of where these songs should go and
Yeah.
where to take them. So in a sense, he's, as a producer, he's sort of filling the role of the bands that I used to play in. Like, I'd come up with a song and I mean, whoever wrote, there were other writers in the bands. We'd bring the songs to the band and we'd hash them out. But Lincoln sort of supplanted that, in terms of just being a record producer. So it's been a great experience.
Thrilling, thrilling. Well, let's listen to one of the tracks, can we, from A Little Too Late? Can you choose and set this up for us?
Sure. I think the first one we're going to do is kind of has an interesting title. It's called Mama Cat, um, which is kind of a ballad. Well, it is a ballad. Um, it's a um, it's a love song, And it's a love song that really sort of it has some sort of a melancholy to it, I think, which is interesting to me. But it's definitely a song about that moment when you are sort of in that you sort of have that feeling you found the person you want to spend your time with, and there's sort of both that great exhilarating feeling but also this feeling of maybe fear or uncertainty that goes with it. So it's an interesting song. What I'll say about this song though, because going back to the conversation we've just some of the things we just talked about, this and maybe another song we'll play today is from what I call sort of the slush pile of ideas. Um, so I mentioned how, like in my 20s and 30s, I wrote a lot, but a lot of ideas weren't finished. So I often go back when I don't have like an idea, a new idea that I'm obsessed with. I'll often go back to old ideas and sort of see if something will restart, get me back to that place. And often I find that whether it's 10, 20, or even 30 years between the original, idea of a song and the finishing of a song of it, it seems to matter like that it's the time, like coming back to it and finishing it at that time seems to make sense. Like it's sort of an inevitability, right?
I
And I
love
think
that.
this song is an example of it, where the verses are are a certain way and even in a way sort of repetitive in their feel and sort of chord progression. And then there's a bridge that sort of uplifts the song. And I never felt like this song, I always loved when I wrote the song, the sort of lyrics and the feeling behind it, but it needed something that was missing and I just didn't have it. And it just sat in this pile, my slush pile of ideas, of misbegotten ideas. And the bridge came to me. And sometimes it's like, we talked about COVID, which kind of got me back into the idea of making another record and just this feeling of I'm going to make another record and I'm going to work on songs. And this song just came back to me and the bridge came out, you know, 25, 30 years later after the original writing of the song. So yeah, that's it, Mama Cat. And
I
Mama
love
Cat's the character Mama Cat, sort of an inside joke that only one person would actually really understand. But I don't like to explain too much. I like to leave things up to the whole point of songwriting is you shouldn't explain what the song means. You should leave it up to one's imagination.
to the
So,
listener. All right, everyone. This is Alan Walker from A Little Too Late, and this is Mama Cat. Absolutely brilliant, Alan. I love it. Who is Mama
thank you.
Cat to you? Can I just ask? Can we give that away?
Oh boy. Well, I'll just say this. It's obvious. If you know me, it's obvious. But yeah, I think one of the reasons, and it is cat with a K. It is I think it's important to I think we all what is that cliche like art imitates life, or
Yeah.
you
Mm-hmm.
take from real life and you make art of it. And I think,
Mm-hmm.
you know, you certainly pull from things in your own life and from people and situations and stories. But when it goes into a song, there's always like this line you walk between fiction and
Of
what's
course.
fiction and what's autobiography. So I think, and I think that's true in everything I write. There sometimes a line just works because it sounds right, and sometimes that line is something that can be really meaningful.
Really
You do,
meaningful. Mm-hmm.
yeah, you do want a song that makes sense, and often you write a song and there's a line that doesn't make sense in the
Mm-hmm.
context of the song, and
Mm-hmm.
you can't, again, it goes back to that thing of trying. It's hard to just go back and try and fix that line.
Right.
It sort of has to like work its way out of you somewhere, somehow. So you just keep playing it. And there's a great example of that in the Beatles documentary of Making Let It Be, where George Harrison has written something that's the amazing song, something in the way she moves.
Yeah.
And attracts me like something. He doesn't have the words. And John Lennon just tells him to, I forget what fruit he says. He just tells him to sing something about an eggplant or something like that, and it just fits the exact rhythm of the song. I had when I was watching that documentary, there was this moment of recognition because I think all of us do that to some
You
degree.
bet. There's
Yeah,
no question about it.
yeah,
And getting back to your idea about the slush pile,
yeah.
I mean, even Paul McCartney has his slush pile he
Oh
goes
yeah,
back to.
yeah.
I remember in a recent interview with him, he said that when he gets an idea, he gets onto his phone, he puts it right onto that voice memo. I mean, like so many of us. It always seems though when I'm trying to write the great hit song that I'll put something down and then I realize it's some sort of, counter theme in an opera I've done, from years ago, and I might have an issue with that. Um, but hey, there you go.
But
Uh,
we do. That's a great point. Like, I mean, we do. I mean, there are certainly lots of examples where someone either consciously or maybe unconsciously stole a
mhm,
melody
mhm.
for a song. There's some
Well, that's
very
a big
famous.
issue. Yeah.
There are very famous, examples of that.
Mhm.
But a lot of times it is, very unconscious. I know there's a song on my record called "Town Called Misery," and it's sort of like a Joe Jackson song. Like the groove is very like early Joe Jackson, but the song is sort of like a, she's leaving home song about someone who leaves a town that's dying, and comes to the big city. And it's sort of a to me, it was like a nostalgic song because people can't leave anywhere. Now that everybody lives on the internet, you can't leave. You can never escape
It's true.
anything. And so this line, Town Called Misery, I actually, I Googled it and I looked on YouTube for someone else. And I did find two other songs called Town Called Misery, but they were by bands that, hadn't had a lot of streams or I hadn't heard of. And after I'd recorded it and played it live a number of times, I was listening to an interview by Todd Rundgren, who's a
Of
big,
course.
big
Mhm.
influence and great artist, and about the making of a record with this English band called XTC, who are also one of my favorite bands, or is one of my favorite bands. And he mentioned this song that has this incredible string arrangement, which one of the guys in the band arranged. And I went back and played that song, and it's not called Town Called Misery, but in that song, there's the line Town Called Misery. And I said, oh, that's where I got it from. It was in,
Uh-huh.
so it's stealing, but it's totally unconscious. And the song is totally different. There's no, melody steal or anything like that. But like, that's where ideas come
That's right.
from what we talked about earlier. Just it's all in there and just coming out in weird, mysterious ways.
It does. It does.
Brilliant mistakes, or sometimes
Brilliant mistakes. So
not so brilliant.
so
Sometimes.
tell me about your collaborators in this recent recording. Talk to me about everyone who's involved.
Oh wow. How much time do we have? There's so many. I'll stick to the highlights.
Yeah.
The the band the band was when we did basics, and by basic tracks, that's when you do sort of your drum tracks and some of the sort of the core stuff in the arrangement. Always bass, usually rhythm guitar, and we we had even though I play piano on a lot of the record, we brought in a B3 player. I can play B3, but it's not. I'm not a super pro. I'm not a
Okay.
genius at it. I love doing it, but it's not like my greatest skill for sure. So we brought this piano keyboard player named Rob Schwimmer. I don't know if you've heard of Rob, but
No.
Rob is a very eclectic, brilliant child prodigy musician who Lincoln loves to use just because he's one of these people that music just streams out of him. I mean, if you look him up on his website, you can see all the people he's played with. It's from, Paul Simon to Bobby McFerrin to um, lots of classical stuff too. He's like totally crosses genres, and he's watching him is just in the studio is kind of amazing because you can't. I think Lincoln. Well, I don't want to put words in Lincoln's mouth, but watching Lincoln produce him is interesting because like Rob is one of these people that just has too many ideas, and it's just the producer has to step in and say, no, that, do this, and try
Right.
and try and corral his mad genius. But he's also I don't know if the what the best way to say this. He's also one of the two most recognized theremin players in the world.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah, so he's a brilliant theremin player, and he's got all these other crazy keyboards that he uses that very few people have mastered, but Rob has mastered just about every one. So
The
we used it.
theremin, coming back to the day the earth stood still and the wonderful movie Spellbound. Oh
Oh,
my
sure.
gosh. Oh
All
my
those
gosh.
soundtracks. I
Yeah,
think of the Beach Boys. I can't, that's what, when you say theremin, I think of the Beach Boys, of course.
I love
Um,
it. Okay.
but yeah, Rob is like a one of a kind, truly one of a kind artist. And who's done his own recordings. On drums, we typically would have used the guy who's playing in the band now. This great drummer, Denny McDermott. But we for an array of reasons, we used a young guy named John Kimmick who we'd never used before. John is the son of a very famous guitarist and plays with a lot of different acts. And he's a great guy. And he just came in. We met him that day, and he just did an amazing job. We on the basics, just a fabulously talented drummer, very musical drummer. And on guitar, Lincoln is a producer, but also the bass player. He's a master bass player. He's played with everybody. And on guitar, John Harrington, Harrington Hering, and John also is a very eclectic player who's can play just about any style from jazz to rock to anything, pretty much anything. But he's also been the sort of lead guitarist for Steely Dan for at least I don't for more than a decade, at least
Right.
quite a
Right.
while, yeah.
Yeah.
And John again is one of these guys who just has a very tasteful and just soulful and
Mm,
approach, and just kind of knows how to play the right thing for every song.
I
And
love
he's
that. Tasteful. I love that. Yeah.
oh yeah, he's just he when he starts playing, he just like you just feel it, and
Mm,
he knows when to be understated or how to play,
mm-hmm.
with
Mm-hmm.
understatement, and he knows when
Mm-hmm.
to come out, and when it comes to playing solo, I mean, he's like with Steely Dan, he can do anything with a guitar. So it was
That's
really a
fantastic.
blast to like listen to him play on these things that started up here in my brain.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then besides that, we used a number of other artists on specific songs. We had a horn section. We had a couple of great cello players who played on one song. Um, and then we brought in, for the first time, something I've never done is used female background singers
Oh,
on three songs, three very different songs with very different uh, sort of approaches to the background vocals. One was a ballad, one was kind of an R&B thing, and one was what I call the album art project, like the song that just sort of like goes in directions like we both Lincoln and I never imagined, like at the start. But the two singers were Lucy Kaplansky, who's a pretty well-known, very well-known artist in her own right, and Teresa Williams, who's also a well-known artist in her own right. And Lincoln had worked with both of them together and knew they'd have fun together, and it would be a good session. And it was amazing. Um, the Teresa Williams is also married to Larry Campbell. Larry is uh, played on one song. It was the song you just listened to. He is the acoustic guitar player and the I talk about burying the lead when you played that song Mama Cat. The pedal steel and acoustic guitar are played by Larry, and he's again a master instrumentalist and producer. He won a Grammy for producing Levon Helm, and he's recognized in the music biz is just one of the best. So we were he's shined his light on a couple of songs of mine of ours, mine and the bands in the past, and he really did an amazing job on this one song. So
that's fantastic, Alan. This is so exciting.
it is,
There,
yeah,
there are immense riches here in
very
Connecticut,
much so, yeah,
and you're
very much
you're
so.
you're one of them. I love that you are the master of your own creation, and you're leaving a legacy of your own life, within your music. But there is this parallel between the words that you work with every day and what you craft or you help others craft on an educational level, of course, in it at Penguin. And then of course what you're offering the world. And I love the fact that you say you have all these melodies running through your mind. And for all of us, we wish we had all those melodies running in our mind. That's a gift. I mean,
Mhm.
it's been bestowed to you, and you're a wonderful caretaker of it. I mean, I think it's very exciting. So, good luck with A Little Too Late. This is fantastic.
I appreciate that, and I love the way you describe that. I would only say that, sometimes that thing that happens in your head with songs replaying and
Mhm.
melodies can also be a curse, because sometimes it's not something you want in your head. Like, you know, for example, like the Ozempic theme song, which is actually a great
Oh,
song, but
yeah.
then you get like the Ozempic version playing through your head. And I have trouble getting things, we call them, it's not like my favorite term, but earworms, that
Yeah.
just stay over in your end. And there's some that I have that I don't like, and I don't even know where they came from. And
Yeah.
I think sometimes songwriting is a way to get those things that I don't want playing over in my head out of my head. So there is that
Oh,
part of it too.
I get it. I totally get it. I
Yeah,
love it. And
yeah.
that's real too. So talk to me about your upcoming gig in New Haven.
Well, thank you for asking. Yeah, we're doing a show, the my band, which is made up of three. I mentioned Danny on drums, a great bass player named Mike Viseglia, who plays with a number of artists, including Suzanne Vega, and John Putnam. John is a fantastic guitarist who played a lot with the Brilliant Mistakes. With Brilliant Mistakes, we had four guys, band members, and the guitarist dropped out because he had a professional audiology business and he couldn't keep up with the band, the commitment to the band. So we tried to find a replacement. Nobody was good enough. So we then that was our foray into sort of hiring guitarists. We also had horn players back then that we hired. And so John's been a friend and a fellow musical partner for many years. So when I needed to sort of form a band, he was actually the first person I called. Um, and Mike was sort of a happy. Well, Mike was the bass player was sort of happy accident, because normally Lincoln would be I would ask Lincoln to do it, but he'd had some health issues that sort of, while I was starting to play out, kept him at home for a little while. So, but again, I think Lincoln is happy being the sort of master behind
Of course.
Lincoln does a lot of live playing. He's part of and I mean, he does a lot of gigs. Like, all these guys play with lots of different musicians, because they're
Sure.
they're basically like freelancers.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
one of the things Lincoln does with Larry Campbell and a couple of other great guitarists is this act called Masters of the Telecaster. There's three guitar players who, they do the show, and each one of them is sort of brilliant at the Telecaster in their own special way. I'm not a guitar nerd, as they call some, but I think, for even if you're not, like, they do a show that's just really fantastic and
Oh,
worth.
that sounds great.
Yeah.
That sounds absolutely great. So, getting back to this show in New Haven, this is
Yeah.
April 25, right?
April 25th,
Coming up.
in New Haven. It's a double, and then a really fun double bill with a relatively new friend of mine named Brian Larney, Larney. And Brian, like me, is a really melodic songwriter with a lot of sort of 70s and beyond influences.
Hmm.
So we really sort of we're different types of writers, I think, in some senses. He's actually a great guitarist and piano player. I'm just a piano player, but we definitely have this sort of love of melody in common, and so it'll be really fun. He's also a lifelong Connecticut-based musician, and it'll be sort of really fun show. And he's going on at 8 o'clock. My band will probably go on sometime around 9 o'clock, and it should be a night of melody.
And
And oh, sorry, go ahead.
this is at Cafe 9
Cafe Nine.
online
Did I say that? Yeah,
at
Cafe Nine in
April.
New
Yeah.
Haven,
Okay.
Connecticut. Yeah.
Okay, this is brilliant. Well, I gotta say to everybody listening out there, discover Alan Walker and A Little Too Late, because it's actually not a little too late. It's right on time, I think. And the first thing you can do for yourself is go out and hear his show on April 25th at Cafe 9 in New Haven. But then look for this album. And Alan, how can we find out more about you without finding Alan Walker, the 23-year-old DJ in Norway who's so famous?
Well, that's the curse part of it. It's very hard to find me. Sometimes the only way to find my website, in the first 100 pages of Google is to write my name and write like a name of a song, and then I'll come up. So if you know the name of a song, now this album that you have, was pictured behind me as my background, isn't coming out officially until June 28th, I believe. We're going to release
Okay.
a couple of singles. You played one of them, Mama Cat, and we're going to release one single in called Twist of Fate in early May, and then another one in late May, and then the full record in late June. So that you're getting like an exclusive,
I
one of a
know.
kind, first in the world, listening on this show, which is exciting, I think. So
It's
so
very
to
exciting.
find me, my website is Alan Walker Music, Alan spelled Alan, walkermusic.net. That's the other famous
Okay.
guy took all the other URLs. And then you can find my shows, and you can have links to all my solo stuff, and my band stuff is all there on that record. So you can find links and stream. You can also join a newsletter, and I'll send you emails once in a while.
That's fantastic. And then I think when we have the Alan Walker Around the World party, I think we should feature it on this show. I think
I
it
think
would
so
be a
too.
fantastic gig right there.
Well, it was your idea, Pamela, so we can't do it anywhere else. You have to do your show.
Alan, this has been such a joy. And I want you to keep looking into that slush pile and see what else you can muster, because now you've ignited a fire within yourself again. And I think it's so exciting. And thank you for expressing all this and sharing everything with us. And just before you go, I want to know about Aunt Mimi's records. And I know
Yes.
that there's a special story behind that.
Yeah, not so much. I mean, it's the label that my fellow band partner and songwriting partner Eric Philbrook from the Brilliant Mistakes, we came up with for our own label for the Brilliant Mistakes, and I've just kept releasing it on that label.
Mhm.
But Aunt Mimi was the woman who raised John Lennon, who of course is one of my heroes, musical heroes, and everybody's heard the song Julia, which is a song about John Lennon's mother. But John Lennon's mother left him, basically abandoned him when he was a kid, and left him with her sister, who was Aunt Mimi. So, there's sort of like a forgotten person in history. We don't want Aunt Mimi to be forgotten in history. So we're just
That's
trying
right.
to keep her alive, because without her, who knows? Who knows? I mean, Julia was a very important person in John Lennon's life too, but Aunt Mimi was the one who fed
Hey,
him and sent him to school and got him through life. So she deserves some credit too.
and she was immortalized in the film Nowhere Boy. I feel the independent film about John Lennon's
Right.
younger life, where they really chronicled this, and she bought him his first guitar.
That's
Hey,
right.
Paul. I
That's
mean,
right.
great
Thank you
things
for filling
start
in that
in
important gap.
small
Yeah,
places sometimes.
that's
Well,
right.
Ellen Walker, thank you so much for being on Center Stage. It's always a joy. You bring a particular clarity to finding your art, which I really appreciate. And good luck with everything at Penguin. And may that further ignite, I don't know, fantastic ideas for you in
I
this
appreciate it.
correlation between words, music, the creativity of just the whole circle of the performing arts world that you're embracing. So don't be a stranger to us. And to everyone listening out there, I hope you'll go to centerstage with PamelaKoon.com for more shows like this, as we all walk forward, supporting the arts and just letting everybody know what's out there. And so right now in Connecticut, Alan Walker is doing his thing. So go back and develop more melodies, Alan, and we'll get together in the Alan Walker party, and I look forward to that. Okay.
I look forward to it too, Pamela.
All
Thank you
right.
so much for having me. This has been
Take
great.
care and all the best. And to everyone else out there, stay safe. This is Pamela Kuhn, and the curtain is now down on Center Stage.
To save him. when the nighttime rolls around and the dreams you might have found carry on inside her heart. When the darkness sheds its light, is it enough to know